Thanks, Steve.
So, hello and welcome to a slightly different version of the podcast that I normally do. We are on a shameless promotional plug for something called Purple Socks Day, which we're going to promote heavily over the next few weeks, which is a fantastic organisation and charity and cause, which I'm going to let Andrew talk about. And we thought, well, actually, who better before we introduce you to lots of really cool guests with their own brilliant business story and everything else to tell, than the founder of it all, and almost share his story and everything else as well. So if you join us for the next kind of 30, 40 minutes, if you drop a message, it should pop up on my screen. I'd love to say hello. And hopefully, yeah, if you come with us and just discover more about Andrew and Purple Sock Day and what it's all about and what we're trying to achieve, hopefully it'll be a really interesting conversation. So Andrew, how are you? How's your Monday been?
Yeah, hi, Steve. Well, thank you for inviting me on. Good Monday so far. As ever, the day goes far too quickly, but it's been a good start to the week.
So I love, for me, it's all about transparency and honesty. And I love that's my personal take on things. So we've been planning this for about a month and a half. And I've been involved in one way or another with Purple Sock Day and yourself for about a year or so. But for people that might not have discovered you so far, would you be happy to give a quick kind of 60-second intro on who you are, where you're from, the kind of stuff that you do, just to kind of set the scene?
Yeah, of course. So my goodness. So I grew up in the East Midlands, a little tiny county called Rutland. So for all of you that are very keen on Trivial Pursuits, it's the smallest county in England. So there you go. And actually the county motto is multum in parvo, much in little, which I think has probably defined actually much of my journey. Really, I've always been on the side of the underdog, always looking for something there, and a real belief that there's a potential and an adventure in almost anything. I had a really happy childhood. I grew up in a little tiny village called Edith Weston in this county of Rutland. And so the nearest big metropolis would be somewhere like Peterborough or Leicester, just to put that into context. But I had a really happy childhood. My mum, a farmer's daughter, very working class. She was a cleaning lady. My dad was from the northeast, from Sunderland, and he was a cook. And he was posted to Rutland, RAF North Luffenham. So he was a cook on the air base, and he fell in love with the countryside and decided to make a life there. So I grew up. I'm an only child, so I'm very, very comfortable in my own company. But I love socializing and company as well. I was blessed with a great ability to be good at sport, and despite my sort of fairly modest and working class background, I was lucky enough to get a sports scholarship at a local private school called Oakham School.
Wow.
Which was great. So I spent some happy years there, taking my what was then O and A levels, and was able to continue my love of sport. And then that took me off into my next adventure, into adulthood, basically.
I was going to say, I thought the whole interview was going to, it would have been the easiest gig ever. You just talk for half an hour, it'd be brilliant. But so you wear lots of different hats for lots of different organizations. Would you be happy to just give a quick summary on what those are?
Yeah. So my, I talked about going off into adulthood. I was, and I think there was probably part of the reason I grew up in a really tiny environment, very, very small, very tiny. And I just had this real wanderlust at a very early age, and I wanted to see the world. And that's what really took me off in my, sort of first sort of entry into the world of work, really. So I did pretty well at my exams, got a place at uni, but I took a year out, and that was in France. I went to work for a company called Canvas Holidays, who are one of the pioneers. I think hopefully we might talk about entrepreneurship a little bit later, Steve, but this was a great entrepreneur, Scottish entrepreneur, who created the first, I suppose, posh camping. So I went to work for them over in France, and I loved it. So I deferred my year for another year and stayed in France for another year, and eventually just didn't go back at all or enter into further education. And that's where I kind of forged my path. So I lived in France for, my goodness, getting on for about four years or so. My French isn't too bad, or wasn't too bad then anyway. Then I got a job for Qantas Airways, continuing my love of travel, and sort of worked my way into sales and marketing. That really satisfied my wanderlust. And I saw a lot of the world, very fortunately, as a result of being an employee for an airline. And then briefly that took me into the world of entertainment travel. And I left Qantas to join an agency that specialized in travel for bands on the road and film crews and that kind of thing.
That's quite cool.
And that was pretty cool. And that's where I met my wife now, Claudia. So we in very quick succession, really, we got married. We then decided we'd set up a business together, which was an events business called Innovision. And we did that in very quick succession. And we've been running our events business now called Innovision for, my goodness, getting on for about 27, 28 years.
Wow.
But then a few years ago, which I think is probably the main thrust of our conversation today, we created Parallel as well, which we've been running now for many, many years.
So on Parallel then, and we'll come back to the other stuff because I don't want to gloss over some of you will have learned so much in 27 years of business, especially also working with your wife. I'm not sure me and Lisa would be able to do that. So that's a talent in itself. But would you be happy to both, before we go into these, go on a bit more about the organization, what you do, who you work with, and why you exist?
Yeah. So I set up Parallel really off the back of a couple of things, really. One was our business, which I mentioned earlier, called Innovision, and one of our biggest clients at the time was Red Bull. And we did all of lots of brilliant things for Red Bull. I talked about underdogs earlier, and it was so exciting working for Red Bull many years ago because they were, a really exciting company, created a whole new category and doing some really exciting things and pushing the envelope out there. And it was really, really exciting and exhilarating. But actually, possibly a more little known fact about Red Bull is that they actually underwrite a spinal cord research charity called Wings for Life.
Wow.
And that was really driven by their owner, who sadly passed away just a year and a half ago, Dietrich Mateschitz. One of his good friends, his son had a road accident and spinal injury. So he was driven to set up a spinal cord research charity called Wings for Life. And Red Bull, of course, being Austrian, and they wanted to set up their charity in the UK. And so I guess I was asked to see whether I could help them with their event strategy and their fundraising. And I guess, Steve, if I'm honest, when one of your biggest clients asks you for a little bit of a favor, it's quite difficult to say no. So, but actually I went into that eyes wide open, and I learned an awful lot. Not only, of course, learned an awful lot about spinal cord research, but I, came across some individuals, a community, a whole world, which I had previously not really known or really knew about. And it really opened my eyes and ears. And it really made me stop and think about the world of disability and the disabled community. And then, kind of on the back of that as well, not at the same time, but maybe a couple of years later, my dad, who sadly, passed away as a result of that, had Parkinson's, and that's a really cruel, progressive disease, and obviously as he physically declined, he became more and more disabled and more reliant on a wheelchair, mobility aid, and of course that really had a mark on me. And I have to say, first-hand experience of that social model of disability, so many barriers in society that that kind of prevent you. So it really drove me to try and create a movement, a brand that could tackle some of our societal problems around disability, but importantly for me, to do this in a way that was really positive. So I didn't really want to focus on on the negative side,
Hmm.
because there are lots of really great organizations already doing that in terms of the world of activism and charity and lobbying. But I really wanted to, have a really good creative outlet
Hmm.
to really focus on the positive aspects of disability and disabled people, and to create events and campaigns that can really help to tackle some of our societal issues. And it also allowed me, Stephen, I wish social enterprise was more of a thing when I was a lot younger. And I'm a huge fan of social enterprise, that balance of profit and purpose,
Hmm.
creating businesses that are sustainable, but actually are really driven by purpose and doing good in society. And so that was my driver for how I set up Parallel as a social enterprise with a social mission to support deaf, disabled, and neurodiverse communities to be free to live life to the full in mainstream society. So that's broadly, what was my sort of motivation and driving force for setting up Parallel.
No, cool. And hello to Apicorn in Thailand as well. She always tunes in. So I've got to ask, so
Hello.
how long has that been since you first set up
So,
Parallel?
so actually, Parallel was a twinkle in my eye. Would you believe that would have been back in 2011?
Wow. So 12
Yeah,
years, 12, 13 years.
yeah, so quite a while ago, and at that time it was a busy time actually in London, UK. It was the Olympics,
Hmm.
and with our event business, we were actually really busy. So it's just having the headspace and the bandwidth, and importantly, for lots of other stakeholders to have the bandwidth.
Hmm.
So I had the idea. I remember vividly, having a half an hour coffee with the then president of the IPC, the International Paralympic Committee, a great guy called Phil Craven. So Phil Craven, good northern lad, who became the president of the IPC. Wonderful man. And I managed to get a half an hour cup of coffee with him,
Wow.
and ran the idea of Parallel, by him, and he gave me some brilliant advice actually, because at that point I wanted to create a really major flagship event, which perhaps I can
Hmm.
chat about a
Of
little
course
bit
you can, of
more.
course.
But he gave me some great advice. He said, whatever you do, don't make it exclusively about disability.
Hmm.
You've got to make it about everybody. And he was absolutely spot on as well. So anyway, off that advice, I formed Parallel, and that would have been in 2013, Steve. And then it took us another, my goodness, 3 years to plan and launch our first major event, which was Parallel London,
Hmm.
2016, in the Olympic Park.
Wow. And just thank you to Rob, a guy called Robert Farrell that I know pretty well, has shared the link to the website on the main feed. There's the link to buy socks as well. But he makes the point, which I agree with, is that you're a little bit older than I am, but we've both met a lot of people in careers and life and whichever. And I think it's either that you choose to gravitate to people that you align with values wise, which I know I do. I think some of it's conscious, some of it's subconscious. But actually, it's funny. I do genuinely feel that more people now have a social bent on what they do, and they actually care more about society and having a wider good on stuff than maybe they did in the past. That could be a personal thing, but also for me personally, it was that element of where. So I grew up in the Northwest, as you know, so in Liverpool, and I was raised by a single parent. And the first 30, 35 years of my life were largely about getting to myself to a point where, you kind of had a good job and you had a house and getting all the stuff that you want to do. And absolutely for anyone, that should be your goal. And I think it was at a certain point when I was content and we had everything we needed, that, people always say that you should put your own oxygen mask on first, but almost it's then that point where, for me, I started the roadmap, and again, we're a social impact business ourselves, but it's now my life fulfillment has nothing to do with me. Like it does because I run it, but it's about the social good and that kind of thing. So I'm not even sure how. Do you remember how we first met or what the first introduction was? I genuinely can't remember.
I can't. I think were we introduced, Steve? I think we might have been introduced
It could have been
by
Kat from
some.
Seated Sewing, but I can't
I
remember.
think I think it might have been Kat from Seated Sewing who made that kind introduction. And yeah, and I remember that we had a brilliant and I still remember it vividly. We had a brilliant conversation,
Hmm.
didn't we? And we talked a lot about, the state of the education system. And then we talked then about Ken Robinson
See, you
and
beat me to it. I was going to
and
bring Ken
yeah,
back up, who sadly died
yeah.
a few years ago. But also, I did some digging. So on Ken. So, do you want to explain to the audience, if not, I can do it, about who Ken Robinson is and what he looked to do? I'm happy
My
to do
goodness.
do the honors if you don't want to. Or
Well, I will. Yeah, I'll have a go, see. But I think I know your propensity for research and everything. So I think, but Ken Robinson, I had the great joy. So basically, Ken Robinson to this day is the most watched TED Talk of all time.
and he has three as well.
And yeah, and exactly. And so if anybody listening or will listen, if you've got 15, 20 minutes, does creativity kill schools? It is absolutely brilliant. It's quite old, but still stands the test of time. And Ken was a great pioneer in the education system. He had a real strong belief that the education system was just not fit for purpose. And he's quite right, in my view, that we are all, sort of learning by rote. But actually, importantly, it's a one size fits all system, and it's not designed to make the most or to benefit or support us as individuals.
Mhm.
And so when we're talking about, of course, about disability or learning disability, that's very, very important. So Ken was a great thinker about the education system. He was an absolute passionate advocate for creativity
Mhm.
and the power of creativity, and its importance in society. And actually, I think I'm right, but which sadly never saw the light of day. But I think in the time of Tony Blair's government, I think they commissioned Ken to write a white paper on the future of the education system, which he did, but sadly was never adopted. But but I had the great fortune and pleasure because of my working in the world of events of working with Ken. And it still makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand on actually. And I think it was probably about a couple of years before his seminal talk at that TED Talk, where he was road testing that talk at an event that we were producing at the time for an advertising agency called McCann Erickson. And there are very few times when, a speaker just makes an entire production crew just stop and just look, listen, and that was a moment. He was a brilliant man. Hopefully, I've done him justice, Steve.
You have. But the thing that got me was that so I'd never met you, and you were introduced from a friend. But then when you were telling me about this guy, Ken Robinson, I did my homework, I read his book, and did all of the usual stuff, looked at the press cuttings, watched his TED Talks. So this is a guy that became world famous to try and revolutionize education. He had an idea, he had a mission he wanted to do, but he also grew up about 4 miles from where I did. And recently I was with my mum driving through Liverpool, and my mum's first ever night out was at the end of his street. And it's near Goodison Park, near the Everton Stadium. But what kind of blew my mind was that Ken sadly died in about 4 years ago now. It was kind of mid-COVID. And actually, unbeknownst to him or me, one of the big things that we'd started at the same time to the roadmap was trying to revolutionize education. And it was just incredible that that guy could have been from anywhere in the world. He could have been from America or India or anywhere, but he wasn't. But it was someone from a relatively poor part of Liverpool, just had passion. As you say, from small things, great things happen. And it really kind of inspired me to really trying to take that forward. And then just to fast forward that story, for a long time, I looked into how could we also take his mission on to create customizable education. And I did a whole MVP of a new product and what we were looking to do so that you could give his dream to help customize for us business education. But just as I was about to launch, AI and ChatGPT launched, and that's just a lot better. So because that will take off massively over the next few years, Ken's dream will still happen. But the point was, I'm a big fan of talking to people that you're recommended to, but also just going down different rabbit holes for inspiration, because it's incredible what's out there. And I really love the fact that this guy was from my hometown, like, crazy. And although he sadly died, it was, we're trying to fulfill his mission to make business education accessible as well. But anyway, so would you like to talk more about Parallel, the events you do, socks, Purple Sock Day, that kind of thing?
No, absolutely. And just a final point as well on, sorry, Steve, on Ken as well, which again, which is, Ken was also had a disability. He contracted polio at a young age, and so again, perhaps I'll touch on later. Is that there is so much talent out there, disabled talent, that that are really helping, that has helped to shape our world and our thinking, and we need to support more of that, which is part of the work we do at Parallel. But yes, so the first thing I wanted to do with our work at Parallel, to serve our social mission, I guess, was to start what I know best, and that's how to put on a really big event. Because I'm also a real passionate advocate of the power of live communication, live events. That sort of visceral, emotional connection. There's nothing quite like it
I love
if it's
drums.
done in the right way.
Whenever you hear drums, it's the reverberation that you just don't get through speakers.
Yeah, without question. It's there is something, you're quite right, something quite tribal and visceral, about it that is unforgettable. So I wanted to create a real event at scale, but putting disability inclusion at the heart of that experience. But instead of making that experience, sort of charitable or worthy or pitiful, often, the very lazy tropes, I suppose, in the world of disability, I wanted to make the experience, really surprising and cool and innovative and uplifting, and really, really spotlight, the joyful aspect and the joyful nature of the disabled community. But again, in remembering, echoing my ears, the words of Phil Craven, just to make this event for everybody. So it's an event with disability inclusion at its heart, but it's for absolutely everybody. So created the event. The format was a festival. Call it our Festival of Inclusivity. So lots of different themed environments, music and storytelling and active lifestyle, and just as you would expect in any festival. And then running alongside of that, we have a series of challenge events or mass participation. So we have a 5 and a 10K, we have a 1K, we have 100 meters, and we also created something quite unique to us, which is a super sensory 1K. So if you imagine a 1K and every 100 meters, there's a sensory activity. And that's very much designed for neurodiversity or autism or profound multiple learning disabilities. And, and the reason for doing that and so many distances is that hopefully there's something there for everybody. Our motto is start together, finish whenever. So the emphasis is very much on having a go. It's not about winning. It's just about, just getting out there, getting active, getting social. And also, we also wanted to support lots of different charities. So many charities come into our event and use our event as a platform for charitable fundraising as well. So I'm really proud of the fact, we've run, my goodness, 4 parallels now, worked with well over 100 charities and helped raise, in the region of about £1.5 million as well for those charities. So, which is really great. So, that's our event. Obviously we've had a bit of a hiatus because of COVID and all of that, but we have a new home now, which is in the Windsor Great Park, and so we staged our first event in the Windsor Great Park just a few weeks ago. Really successful.
It was July, just so you know. It's now October.
Yeah, well, sorry, gosh.
The year
talked about
is
time
going
just
fast.
flying. Yeah,
true.
I know. My goodness. You're right, Steve. But it was our first event in the Windsor Great Park. I've got huge amounts of gratitude to the Crown Estate, who have really warmly embraced us. And I'm still pinching myself. We have such a beautiful location. We're on the Long Walk, the backdrop of the Windsor Castle. And it's a really, and again, it really lends itself for a really sort of memorable occasion. So that's where we stage event, and again, my hope there is to get more and more brands involved. I'm a great believer that if we can get more and more really cool brands standing shoulder to shoulder with disability, it's really powerful, and that is, my view, much more powerful than a government campaign or a lobbying, whatever. If you can really get the cool guys standing shoulder to shoulder with disability, then that's gonna change some attitudes and behaviors.
For me, as long as it's done the right way, not just for the photo opportunity.
Yeah.
It's that element of just I think people now understand it in a way that, but it's that I call it my bullshit meter, but it's almost where you do get people that greenwash things, that say they've done something for the sake of it, but they're not actually doing the hard yards, if that makes sense.
It makes complete, sorry to interrupt you. I mean, it makes complete sense, and something I call, sort of culture over campaign. And you want to be working with brands where there are certain values embedded into their culture, rather than it just being a one-off campaign, which is an advertising campaign or whatever, where they portray a certain message or a story or a narrative, but it's really very, very short-sighted and broadly very much focused on sales or whatever. So I couldn't agree more, and we're really lucky to be working with a number of brands with Parallel who are authentic, they really care, make us as well be as good as we possibly can be as well. It's very much a two-way thing. And but you're absolutely right. There is still far too much, greenwashing or whatever, in whatever campaign or brands just associating just for a moment rather than for a lifetime, really.
And then, would you like to tell people about these?
Yes, some purple socks. So the whole point with Parallel is to create a whole series of events and campaigns. So the last thing I wanted to do was to create another event business. As you can see by my my hair, I've done enough events, Steve. But I wanted to create some more campaigns that could tackle other aspects, within the disabled community. So I was looking at the International Day of Disabled People, which is on the 3rd of December. It's one of the many UN observance days. So it's it's a global observance days. It's been running since 1992, and it's been getting more and more pickup here in the UK. And not too bad, but mainly the main focus has been very corporately driven, which is no bad thing, of course, but I wanted to try and create something that wouldn't necessarily cannibalize that campaign or campaigns of that corporate engagement, but to create something that was really simple, a simple act of mass participation that could get more public engagement with that day.
Well, there's a famous one with noses, if we throw that one out there.
Well, I have to say, and I've got a whole gratitude. I did actually chat to a number of people who had worked on Red Nose Day as part of my business planning and my ideas for Purple Sock Day. And I am unashamedly, a lofty ambition, Steve. I want Purple Sock Day to be the Red Nose Day for disability. I'm unashamedly.
Well, it's more sustainable because you can wear them all year round. And I have several pairs of these. But the point is, and also no plastic is the other benefit.
Exactly.
Not to bash.
No, exactly.
It's
you're quite right. So I did do my due diligence, and I did chat to a number of people who had worked or part of the early part of that campaign. And I thought, well, what's a simple act of mass participation that most people do every day? And if you ask them to do it, it's not going to take them too much out of their daily routines. So, of course, most of us put on a pair of socks every day, purple being the color most associated with disability, certainly here in the UK. So the idea of Purple Sock Day was born. So the idea of asking people to buy and wear a pair of our purple socks, and then obviously share pictures of themselves on social media, to amplify that message. But part of that thinking was that that's all well and good, but why would people wear purple socks? There has to be a reason. There has to be a bit of social impact.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many things I want to tackle. And one of them is to see how we can further support entrepreneurship for disabled talent. And I thought that this could be a really good beneficiary for this campaign. So I thought to myself, okay, the next thing I need is a really, really great sock partner who make great socks, who make their socks in a really ethical and sustainable way. And I'm very, very lucky that a good friend of mine is Dave Gordon, who is the founder of BAM. And they are a fantastic activewear company. And Dave has been a real pioneer for sustainable clothing, and actually one of the early adopters for making clothes from bamboo.
And he's a guest in about 2 weeks.
He is indeed, and he's got a great story. He's got a great story and a great man. And and Dave, in a heartbeat, really wanted to support the campaign. He really wanted to support disabled entrepreneurs. So there was our sock partner. So basically, the piece of the puzzle is that BAM essentially make all of our socks at cost. They don't make any profit or anything, which enables us to retail our socks, at an affordable price for most people. So this year it's at £6. And then what we do, Steve, is that we ring fence 50% of the proceeds to go into a fund that can then support the journeys for budding disabled entrepreneurs in terms of their business and their business education as well. And then we reinvest everything else to buy more socks for the following year.
And that's also where we come in, because it was one of the big things that when we had our first conversation, I instantly got it. And I could instantly see the link that I'm going to ask you in a second about how and why do you think it's important to nurture that talent. But from a selfish point of view, I know firsthand what it's like to grow up and you can't access things. I know a lot of people, with the cost of living and everything else, they have kids to feed, they have energy bills, whatever. But actually, business education in many ways changed my life and opened up so many doors that it's allowed me to do stuff. But I was able to do that because I'd managed to escape a lot of the things holding me back, but also because, for instance, we don't have kids. I had time to do it the old-fashioned way and just read hundreds of books and go out and practice and do things. But the truth is, a lot of people have barriers which hold them back and prevent their talents. And these are really good, talented people. So the whole reason why Roadmap MBA exists is to help people have the roadmap to grow their business or career. But importantly, that anyone anywhere in the world can learn completely for free in a way that will just to help them achieve their own kind of goals. And I know from some of our mutual friends and past conversations to do with a lot of disabled entrepreneurs, there's a whole extra tier of challenge there, because often their energy bills are even higher for support of different kit. They have, sometimes harder challenges to get around, or maybe that they don't want to leave the house or whichever. But the point is, it's that I'm with you. It was almost, how can we create a universal support system which is commercially sustainable? It's not just asking for handouts, but actually that wants to do social good. So when I heard about Purple Sock Day, I just instantly wanted to support. And then the plug to anyone that gets involved. I think our code's PSD23, which is Purple Sock Day 23. And basically anyone who watches this can get free access to all the Roadmap MBA stuff, or just drop me a message on social. But it was just, I instantly understood what it was and what you were trying to do. And I think it's awesome. So can you tell people almost where can they find socks, buy socks? What's the plan for the rollout this year?
So for the plan for the rollout this year, and I also I should say as well, Steve, just before I blatantly plug that, and thank you, but I think as well, I have a great deal of thanks to you as well, because it really also expanded my thinking in terms of how we can benefit more across Purple Sock Day, to extend to business education, as well as obviously support in terms of, setting up a business and all of that. And you're right, it's so important, and, and often, inaccessible or not taught. And, and it is so important And I think the work that you're doing at Roadmap MBA is just phenomenal. And I'm just delighted to have the opportunity, to work with you, and that Purple Sock Day can also, work in tandem with the great work that you're doing as well. And hopefully this is something we can really grow. We just recently launched Purple Sock Day on the BAM website. So our socks can be purchased. I think I mentioned they're £6 a pair. You can go onto the BAM website. There's a landing page, which is bamboo.clothing.co.uk.
I'm pointing to the link in case you wondered what I was doing.
And then it's / purple hyphen sock
people can see
day.
it. We have a link on the thing. They can click it. People know what to do.
Yeah, they can see it. So it's all there, and we'll be running this throughout up until the 3rd of December, which is the International Day of People of Disabled People. So the socks will be on sale between now and then. We've got 3 beautiful designs, a couple of stripy numbers, and our new retro design. So the more pairs you buy, then again, the more that we can raise into the fund, and the more that we can then obviously support budding disabled entrepreneurs. I would also say, Stephen, you're right. Just a final point as well, which is quite unique, I think, to the disabled community. There are many barriers holding back budding disabled entrepreneurs. But there is something quite unique in the sense of, that if you have a disability, you have to jump through many hoops to receive some benefits, some state benefits, to help you. And many of those state benefits, are sort of grounded in the fact that, that you're perhaps not employed, or it restricts you to a certain number of hours of employment. So, and for many of us who are not disabled, and perhaps we do have an idea, or we have a little side hustle or whatever, there's no inhibitors for us to sort of follow that dream or follow that idea, without any form of, sort of retribution if that flies or it doesn't. But I think something that's really terrifying and off-putting for many disabled people is that there's no shortage of ideas, but I think the system would go against them, that if they had a little side hustle and they were found, to be generating income from that side hustle, it would jeopardize their state benefits and their state payments. And that's a huge risk, and that's a huge life risk. If you can imagine, that why would you do that if you're going to lose something that you could no longer afford, your heating or, on your day to day. So I think there are some, real systemic barriers, that is probably more from policy making, that can really help and support budding disabled entrepreneurs to allow them, to, have a side hustle, to create some ideas without fear of retribution. And I think, that in addition to all the other things that you described earlier, Steve, I think will go a long way, to, enable more and more brilliant disabled entrepreneurs to bring their businesses to life, and that will solve, a number of other issues, such as the disability employment gap. My view is that if we have more disabled owned businesses, they're more likely to employ disabled people. It's so there are so many benefits, to really support and galvanize, our disabled talent.
No, cool. Have you ever had any traction with the supermarkets? Because I think that's one of the big things, both on Red Nose Day, but also with the Poppy appeal. And I'm just trying to, the entrepreneur in me always, wants to think, how could we do this bigger, better? Because it's just such an incredible cause, and I think the price point's right, and it's how just to get huge traction is the dream.
I think so, and that's our next challenge for Purple Sock Day, is to really, sort of, I suppose, go from the margins to the mainstream, and we had a little bit of luck, and well, not luck, but a little bit of help in our campaign last year.
Some famous celebrities I've seen.
Yeah, thanks to the wonderful folks at News UK. So we managed to, our sock, onto Chris Evans and Graham Norton, and my goodness, the power of celebrity is
Hmm.
incredible, isn't
Hmm.
it? It's amazing. So we want to try and do more of that. I think, in terms of wider distribution for retail, including supermarkets, I think you're absolutely right, Steve. There are some other sort of considerations there in terms of pricing and trying to keep it affordable, and also still having a degree of liberation, creative license,
Hmm.
all of those things.
Hmm.
So there are kind of pros and cons there. But I think broadly what you've suggested, you're absolutely right. I think for us now is the amplification, is to get it out there to a wider audience, because with Purple Sock Day, we're trying to serve two aims really. One, of course, is to generate proceeds to support budding disabled entrepreneurs, but on the other side is raising awareness for disability inclusion on the International Day of Disabled People. So as many people as we can, to wear socks and be aware of the day. And what follows is to be aware of disability and be more cognizant of everything, then, that's what we want to try and achieve as well. And I
Okay.
think you made a very good point earlier, wearing our socks, you can do that for more than one day as well. So it's a good reminder throughout the course of the rest of the year as well about, why you're wearing those socks and why you bought those socks.
No, I love it. I love it, and I just think it's one of those great causes that for me it ticks all the boxes, and I like how it's done. And you mentioned at the start about how with the the Windsor event and the different live events, it's about the partnerships and the amplification and with other charities to really help just take it to that next level. And I know you've done really great stuff with sports teams and there's some ideas there. And I won't steal your thunder or share your thunder on some of the other stuff, but for me personally, it's nice to work with good people that want to do good stuff, if that makes sense. And I think it's almost likewise, how we both raise money, but also raise awareness. So we have a few more interviews lined up. Would you like to almost share, for the ones that we've got confirmed and booked in, a bit about who you are or who they are, what we're looking to kind of achieve with the interviews?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think next up, I think I'm right in saying, I think I've mentioned him already, is Dave Gordon.
Yep.
Uh, Dave is the founder of Bamboo Clothing. He is a really remarkable guy, and and hopefully
Hmm.
you can also get to talk to him about his pole vaulting as well, Steve. You should definitely talk to him about that. He's an incredible pole vaulter, would you believe? But a great entrepreneur. We also then have Mark Esho, who is another phenomenal entrepreneur, really successful, based in the East Midlands in Leicester. He has a remarkable story
Hmm.
and doing brilliant work. And also another one, Steve, who has basically done super well in his own business, but now giving back
Yep.
and creating an incredible organization to again support budding disabled entrepreneurs as well. He's absolutely brilliant. And then we have, my goodness, the one and only Dr. Shani Danda, who I've had the great pleasure of knowing for many, many years. And it's just been, how Shani has, sort of lit. Her career has just really ignited recently, across many things. She's a campaigner, she's an actress, she's a TV presenter, but she's also she's a consultant, but she's also a brilliant, brilliant entrepreneur as well. And again, she is omnipresent. She is a real force of nature. Such a lovely, lovely person, and she is. I'm so pleased that she's able to join you as well, Steve, to chat about her journey. She's
No, me
amazing.
too. And just funnily enough, so Apicorn, who's in Thailand, who I mentioned before, she said that the socks have a beautiful design, but unfortunately in Thailand they don't wear socks. So we can come up with maybe purple flip flops or something for the tropical climates. But it's an interesting point, and thank you for getting in touch. But on the guests, blatantly it's a blatant promotion for Purple Sock Day between now and 3rd of December. But also just on a visibility point of view, I like to talk to interesting people and learn more about you and them and their story and how they got there. But I think especially now with the internet, because you definitely, but me also, there was a point when it didn't exist. it was almost, I remember the first time I ever went on the internet, it was in like 1997, I think. But it's almost now people can discover people that look like them, sound like them, that have done things that they want to do. And it's just, for me, that's a major part of why we do this, is that I've interviewed BBC Radio 1 presenters and fashion designers and you name it, just different people, because it's cool. I love sharing people's stories. So yeah, over the next kind of few weeks, we've got a few guests lined up, maybe some more if we can squeeze them in. And I just, it'll be really nice to share their story and almost help promote their businesses and stuff as well. So before I go on to the last few questions, part of the kind of interview, for you yourself, you've had a very varied career. You started in Qantas, you've obviously worked in France, and you did lots of different stuff. You've involved with several charities that we haven't mentioned yet and different organizations. But almost for you and yourself and your lovely wife, what's the dream for the future? What gets you out of bed every day? And almost what do you want to achieve moving forward?
I think the motivating force now, as and I guess Steve, and I think you mentioned earlier, I'm a little older than you, so and I think as one advances in years, should I say, you of course you do become a lot more purposeful, but actually, you then are very much aware, I guess, of your own timeline. Mm-hmm. And so the focus is very much more, has become much more action orientated. Yeah. And I think that was one of the motivating forces for creating Parallel. I personally find it really liberating to be able to create campaigns and events that you believe in and can run, and you can create, some actionable points. And I think for me, that is a common frustration. There is too much debate, too much talking, not enough action. So I think what certainly gets us up in the morning is to kind of create activities, events, campaigns, thinking that can drive some actionable mm-hmm. Change, that's really tangible, and that was, again, some of the reasoning behind, the campaigns and everything that we're doing for Parallel, that there is a tangible outcome, mm-hmm. And also ways in which we can tackle, the system as well, systemic changes, so trying to tackle the causes rather than the symptoms. And so often I think, we have a propensity to tinker around, the causes, the symptoms rather than the causes. So that's what, kind of motivates me is to create activities, events, campaigns, that are actionable, that have an outcome. And I think for me as well, I hope, that, for example, some of our work, for example, with Parallel Windsor, it has a legacy. And I very much hope that Parallel Windsor, Steve, not to be too maudlin about things, but, I hope it outlives me, that Parallel Windsor will become, an annual national event that mm-hmm. will run and run and run and live on. And that's that's a good thought for me as well, to create something that has a legacy, mm-hmm. that's something that's tangible, and of course I think for all of us as well, something that we can all kind of feel proud about, as well.
No, like, I am conscious of time, and I could talk to you all day because I wanted to almost dig in more, because over your 27 years in business, doing events and everything that you've done, like I mentioned before the call, but I spoke to someone earlier today that been through times of challenge. And I imagine, in your journey, both business-wise, but also with Parallel, I imagine there's been so many ups and downs and setbacks. And do we keep going? Do we give up? What do we do? But like, I know personally now quite a few of your team that sit behind the scenes. We jump on calls together. And I think realistically, people always say that there's nothing more enduring than an idea. And it's that element of where it's planting the seed that you don't know, and I don't know, people that could be inspired from things they see, that's things, they do that they never, funnily enough, nowadays, nobody ever tells you that they appreciate what you're doing. So I'm going to take this opportunity to say that I appreciate what you're doing, but also I think it definitely will last. And if it doesn't, the socks are really cool as well. So I'm going to keep buying them regardless. Um, so as part of every interview, I have some questions that I like to ask. For me, it's the most kind of my favorite part of the interview, and it's completely selfish, and I get to learn from your kind of past experience. But if you were to give advice to your younger self, and you can pick the guy that didn't go to university and probably chasing people around France and having fun as a teenager and whichever, or all the way through. If you were to give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Wow, my goodness. What would that be? Well, actually, the best advice I've ever received is actually about advice. And that was something along the line as hardly anybody, in fact, I don't know anybody that will ever refuse you if you ask for advice. So never be shy of asking for advice. Now, many people may say no if you ask for help or for money or for
Mm-hmm.
everything, but
Mm-hmm.
actually, if you ask for somebody for their advice, they are, in my experience, always very willing to give you their advice. So I think my advice to my younger self, and indeed to anybody who might be listening, is, if don't be afraid to ask for advice, and you'll be surprised that pretty much everybody, in fact, everybody, I'm going to bet my granny's gold teeth on this, will be happy to give you their advice.
I think it's good and it's true. Genuinely, the amount of, I make a special point, unless I think it's AI, even if people do like a sales pitch, I had one to do with travel support and assistance earlier on. I always go back to them, but I explain why it's not right for me. Just, it's that kind of, and even ironically, do you ever get cold phone calls? I decided to answer one the other day and it was a guy trying to sell me something. So I heard him out, but then I explained why it wasn't fit for me. But he was a very nice guy and we connected on LinkedIn because I still appreciated his hustle, that he worked for a sales outsourcing company, and that's a really tough gig. But as a person behind the phone call, he was a really good guy. And that for me is just, we often all work in our busy lives and our networks, and we all do the stuff that we do. But often it's my belief that people are still inherently good. Not everyone, but, most people. And you never know, there might not be an immediate link today, but it might be in 2 years, it could be in 10 years. And then you're the perfect person to solve a problem that they have, or vice versa. And that, I think, is the value in building relationships with people. That I think that's part of the reason I love to do this, is just to kind of speak to people. So you actually took my second question as well for the last bit, but I think it's a really good answer, so I can't fault it. So where can people find you? How can they buy socks? Is there anything you would like to talk about or plug before we go?
I think for now is the socks, of course, is the main campaign. Purple Sock Day, hashtag Purple Sock Day. So you can tag us there. If anybody would like to get in touch, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm there. So my main things is LinkedIn and Twitter, my main sort of social outlets as well. So anybody would like to get in touch, I'd love to hear from you, and that would be great. Well, I think I can mention now, we're going to, as well, our event, Parallel Windsor. We are going to launch our public registration on Thursday, I'm happy to
Wow.
say. So Parallel Windsor will be on the 7th of July in the Windsor Great Park next year as well. So I'd love for as many people to come, or if there's anybody looking who might want to get involved in the festival or anything really, please get in touch.
Cool. Well, I appreciate your time. It's been lovely to chat today, and hopefully it hasn't taken too much time out of your Monday. So between now and 3rd of December, we're probably going to do lots more of this, and you'll see me promote lots more stuff and probably lots of photos holding things like these. But again, for me, it's a really good cause. There's a really good team behind it. It's ran really well. The mission's good, but also I fundamentally understand the challenges that people face that you're looking to help. And I think it's a really important thing to actually put focus into, because it's that element of where it's also sustainable giving in a way that if you can help, it's the classic adage of, if you can teach a man to fish, if it's rather than handing people a fish, if you can teach them to fish or teach them to run their business, that is a long-term, life-changing, community-changing impact that I know it's what you want to achieve as well. So Andrew, thank you for your time today. If you stay on the call, we'll have a quick chat afterwards. And thank you to anyone that kind of tuned in. Hopefully see you soon. All right, cheers guys. Bye-bye.